The private jet touched down smoothly on the small runway of Cedar Grove Regional Airport, its wheels kissing the concrete for the first time in 15 years. Alex Shung stood by the window, his hand pressed against the cool glass as he watched his hometown come into view. At 35, he was now worth billions, but something about seeing those familiar mountains in the distance made him feel like that nervous teenager who'd left with nothing but a scholarship and big dreams. The flight attendant's voice broke through his thoughts. "Mr. Zhang, we've arrived." He nodded, straightening his simple blue sweater. He'd deliberately chosen to leave his usual designer suits behind. Today wasn't about being a CEO, it was about being himself. As he stepped off the plane, the crisp autumn air hit his face, carrying the familiar scent of pine trees and wood smoke that he'd almost forgotten. His driver waited with a modest black car. He'd specifically requested something that wouldn't draw attention. "Welcome back to Cedar Grove, sir," the driver said, opening the door. Alex slid into the backseat, his heart beating faster than it did during billion-dollar negotiations. He was really doing this. After matching with his high school crush on that exclusive dating app, after all these years of avoiding this place, he was finally back. He pulled out his phone, looking at her profile picture one more time. Kate still had the same warm smile that used to light up their chemistry class. As the car moved through town, something felt off. The streets he remembered buzzing with life seemed eerily quiet. Murphy's hardware store, where he used to buy parts for his early tech projects, was boarded up. The ice cream parlor where he'd spent countless summer afternoons had a for lease sign hanging crookedly in its dusty window. "Has it always been this, empty?" he asked the driver, leaning forward. "Been getting worse each year," the driver replied, shaking his head. "Since the factory shut down, most folks either left or are just getting by." They'd passed the old community center where Alex had learned to code on donated computers. The paint was peeling, but a small group of kids still played basketball in its court. One of them waved at the car, and Alex found himself waving back, remembering how he used to be that kid. The car turned onto Main Street, and Alex's chest tightened. The downtown area that once represented the heart of Cedar Grove looked like it was barely beating. The local diner where his mom used to work extra shifts was dark. The bookstore where he'd spent rainy afternoons reading about Silicon Valley pioneers had been turned into a discount store. But there, in the middle of it all, stood Rose's Cafe, their meeting spot for today. Its red awning was a bit faded, but the windows were clean and warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. Alex checked his watch. He was 20 minutes early, just like old times. "Should I wait, sir?" the driver asked. "No need," Alex replied, stepping out of the car. "I think I need to walk around a bit." As he stood on the sidewalk, watching the car drive away, a group of high school students passed by, their laughter echoing off the empty storefronts. One of them carried a laptop held together with duct tape. Alex remembered doing the same thing with his old computer, saving every penny from his summer jobs to buy spare parts. He walked to the cafe's window, adjusting his reflection. The man staring back at him looked successful, confident, everything he'd dreamed of becoming. But standing here, surrounded by the shells of his childhood memories, that success felt hollow somehow. A bell chimed as he pushed open the cafe door, the smell of fresh coffee and baked goods wrapping around him like a warm hug. The place was surprisingly busy, perhaps the last gathering spot in town. Old men played chess in the corner, a couple of teachers graded papers by the window, and behind the counter, a barista looked up with a smile that suddenly froze on her face. Alex Stone, the boy who'd left Cedar Grove to chase his dreams, was finally home. But the town he'd returned to wasn't the one he'd left behind, and something in his gut told him this date was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would change everything he thought he knew about success, home, and what really matters in life. Alex settled into a corner table at Rose's Cafe, his fingers drumming nervously on the worn wooden surface. The same table where he'd spent countless hours studying years ago still had that small coffee stain near the edge. He checked his phone again, 3:05 p.m. Kate was 5 minutes late, but that wasn't unusual for her. She'd always been fashionably late to everything in high school. The cafe hadn't changed much. Old photos of the town still covered the walls, telling stories of better days. The smell of fresh-baked cookies mixed with coffee created that familiar comfort he'd missed in all those high-end restaurants he now frequented. A young waitress approached, her nameplate reading Jenny, carrying a steaming cup of coffee. On the house, she said with a smile that seemed to hide something, "It's not every day we get someone like you back in town." Before Alex could respond, the bell above the door chimed. His heart jumped, but instead of Kate, a young woman in her mid-20s walked in. There was something familiar about her face, the way she carried herself. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on him with recognition. Without invitation, she pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "You're waiting for Kate, aren't you?" she asked softly. The resemblance hit him then. This was Lisa, Kate's younger sister. He remembered her as a teenager, always tagging along after her big sister. "Lisa," he managed, his coffee suddenly forgotten. "Is Kate running late?" Lisa's fingers intertwined on the table, her knuckles whitening slightly. "Alex, there's something you need to know." She took a deep breath, and in that pause, the bustling café seemed to grow quieter. "Kate, she passed away 5 years ago. Cancer." It was quick, too quick. The words hit him like a physical blow. The coffee cup trembled in his hand as he set it down. But I matched with her on the app. We've been messaging for weeks." "That was me," Lisa admitted, her eyes welling up. "I used her old photos, her profile. I know it was wrong, but we needed to get you back here. Kate, she never stopped believing in this town, even when she was sick. And now it's dying too." Alex sat back, his mind spinning. The cafe around them continued its afternoon routine, the clink of cups, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversations, but it all felt distant, unreal. "This cafe," Lisa continued, gesturing around them, "it was your parents' place before they sold it to Rose, wasn't it? It's the last original business left in downtown. Everything else." She trailed off, looking out the window at the empty storefronts. A memory surfaced. His mother serving coffee here, his father greeting regulars by name. He'd been so focused on escaping this place, on becoming successful, that he'd forgotten what he'd left behind. "Why?" he asked finally, his voice hoarse. "Why go through all this?" Lisa pulled out a worn notebook from her bag. "Because of this, Kate's last project. She had plans for reviving Cedar Grove. She always said the town didn't need charity, it needed opportunity. She believed that if we could just get someone to see the potential here." She pushed the notebook across the table. "She talked about you sometimes, you know. About the boy who built computers in his garage and dreamed of changing the world." Alex opened the notebook with trembling hands. Page after page of Kate's neat handwriting outlined plans for youth programs, technical training initiatives, small business incubators. In the margins were little notes. Ask local tech companies for internships, convert old factory space into learning center, bridge the digital divide. The last entry was dated just days before she passed. "Cedar Grove isn't dead. It's just waiting for someone to believe in it again." Through the window, Alex watched as an elderly man shuffled past, pausing to peer hopefully into one of the empty shops. A group of teenagers huddled at the bus stop, probably dreaming of leaving just like he had. The town he'd been so eager to escape now seemed to be calling out to him in Kate's voice. "I understand if you're angry about the deception," Lisa said quietly, standing up. "I'll leave you alone now. But Kate, she always said you were the smartest person she knew. She believed you'd do something meaningful with your success someday." She placed a key on the table. "That's to Kate's office at the community center. Her research, her plans. They're all there. Do with them what you want." As Lisa walked away, Alex sat there, surrounded by the ghosts of his past and the fragments of Kate's dreams. The coffee had gone cold, but he barely noticed. He picked up the key, its weight in his hand feeling like both a burden and a possibility. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the empty streets of Cedar Grove, and for the first time since he landed, Alex saw his hometown not as it was, but as it could be. He'd come looking for a date with his past, but found something else entirely, a chance to make things right, to give back to the place that had shaped him. The question was he ready to take on that challenge? The key to Kate's office felt heavy in Alex's pocket as he walked down Cedar Grove's main street. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across empty storefronts, each one telling its own story of loss. He stopped in front of the old factory, a massive brick building that had once been the town's beating heart. Now its windows were dark, like closed eyes. Takes you back, doesn't it? A familiar voice called out. Alex turned to find Mr. Wilson, his old neighbor, sitting on a bench nearby. The man's hair had gone completely white, but his eyes still held that same friendly twinkle. "Never thought I'd see you back here, big shot." Alex sat down beside him, the wooden bench creaking under their weight. "The factory, when did it happen?" Mr. Wilson sighed, his weathered hands clasped in his lap. 10 years ago. Started with automation cutting jobs, then the whole place shut down. Funny thing is," he chuckled without humor, "the software they used? Some folks say it came from your company." The words hit Alex like a punch to the gut. He remembered that contract, one of his company's first big successes. They'd developed efficiency software for manufacturing plants across the country. He'd been so proud of that deal, never once thinking about where those efficiency gains came from. 300 people lost their jobs that year, Mr. Wilson continued, not unkindly. "My son Tom, you remember him? He's in Ohio now. Most young folks left. The ones who stayed," he gestured to the quiet street. Alex stood up, needing to move. He walked toward the factory, Mr. Wilson's words echoing in his head. Through a broken window, he could see the empty production floor where his father had worked for 20 years. A faded safety poster still clung to one wall, "Working together for a better tomorrow." His phone buzzed. Another notification about his company's stock price hitting a new high. The irony wasn't lost on him. His success had helped kill his hometown. Down the street, he spotted the old ice cream shop where he'd had his first job. The owner's daughter, Amy, was locking up what was now a discount store. She recognized him, offering a small wave that carried none of the warmth from their childhood. "You still make those amazing sundaes?" he asked, trying to bridge the 15-year gap between them. "Had to sell the equipment years ago," she replied, her voice tight. After the factory closed, nobody could afford $5 ice cream anymore. "But hey, at least we're still here. Some folks weren't so lucky." She pointed across the street to what had been the local bookstore. Old Mr. Chen had to move in with his kids in California. The hardware store. The Thompsons lost their retirement savings trying to keep it open. "But I'm sure you've done great for yourself." The bitterness in her voice made him wince. "Emmy, I never meant to." "Save it," she cut him off, but then her expression softened slightly. "Look, nobody blames you personally. Progress is progress, right? We thought someone would care what happened to places like Cedar Grove." As Annie walked away, Alex noticed a group of teenagers hanging out near the old community center. One boy was showing the others something on a beat-up laptop, the screen held together with tape, just like Alex's had been at that age. But unlike him, these kids didn't have a thriving town full of opportunities around them. He pulled out Kate's notebook, flipping through the pages until he found what he was looking for. Her neat handwriting detailed plans for a technology training center with notes about partnering with local businesses. She'd seen it all coming, had tried to prepare the town for the future instead of letting it get swept away by it. At the end of the street, Rose's cafe's lights glowed warmly in the gathering dusk. Through the window, he could see Lisa serving customers, carrying on her sister's spirit of keeping the community together. The cafe was more than just a business now, it was a living room for a town that refused to give up. His phone buzzed again. His assistant was asking about his return flight. Alex stared at the message for a long moment, then looked up at the factory looming against the darkening sky. The software his company had created might have helped close this place down, but maybe technology could also help bring it back to life. He thought about all the remote work positions his company was struggling to fill, about the millions they spent on training new hires in big cities. Then he looked at these empty buildings, these people who knew the value of hard work and community. Kate had been right. Cedar Grove didn't need charity. It needed a chance. Alex pulled out his phone and started typing, "Cancel my return flight. And get me the contact information for our head of operations. I think it's time we opened a new office." As he hit send, the streetlights flickered on, casting pools of light on the empty sidewalk. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew, the same sound he'd fallen asleep to as a child. But this time, instead of dreaming about leaving, he was thinking about rebuilding. The town that his success had helped break was now offering him a chance at redemption. The morning sun cast long shadows through the old community center's windows as Alex stood in front of Kate's office door. His hand trembled slightly as he inserted the key Lisa had given him. The lock turned with a soft click, and dust motes danced in the sunbeam that streaked across the room. The office was frozen in time. A wall calendar still showed events from 5 years ago, and sticky notes in Kate's handwriting dotted the desk. Call tech companies about internships, read one. Check grant deadlines, said another. Each note was a piece of her dream to save Cedar Grove. I had a feeling I'd find you here, a deep voice said from the doorway. Alex turned to see Mr. Thompson, his old computer science teacher, leaning on his cane. His hair had gone gray, but his eyes still held that same sharp intelligence that had inspired so many students. Mr. Thompson, Alex smiled, memories of after-school coding sessions flooding back. I didn't know you were still here. Someone has to keep teaching these kids that there's a future worth fighting for, the old teacher replied, making his way to a chair. Kate understood that. She used to bring her laptop here every afternoon, working on her plans even during treatments. Alex picked up a thick folder from the desk, its edges worn from frequent handling. Inside were detailed proposals for transforming the old factory into a technical training center, complete with budget estimates and potential partner companies. She reached out to your company, you know, Mr. Thompson said quietly. 3 times. The responses were polite form letters. Alex's throat tightened. He remembered those letters. His staff handled hundreds like them each week. How many other Kates had they brushed aside? She never gave up, though, Mr. Thompson continued, picking up a framed photo from the desk. It showed Kate with a group of high school students, all crowded around a computer. Started a coding club right here. Used her own money to buy laptops. That girl there? He pointed to a smiling teenager. She's in college now, studying computer science. Kate paid for her first semester before she. Through the window, the sound of laughter echoed as more kids joined the basketball game. A girl with a laptop sat on the sidelines, probably working on the coding projects Kate had started. The sun caught the edge of Kate's last proposal, highlighting her final written words. It's not about saving the past. It's about building a bridge to the future. Alex picked up his phone, scrolling to his company's board of directors group chat. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as 15 years of business instincts warred with something deeper, a debt he hadn't known he owed, a promise he hadn't known he'd made. Mr. Thompson, he said finally, looking up. Those kids out there, do they still have that robotics club Kate started? Trying to keep it going, the old teacher smiled. But we're down to our last working robot kit. Alex stood up, straightening his shoulders. Not for long. He began typing on his phone. Emergency board meeting needed. New proposal. Cedar Grove Technology Initiative. Full details to follow. As Mr. Thompson left the office, Alex remained, surrounded by Kate's dreams and his own past. The morning sun had shifted, now illuminating the whole room. On the wall, Kate's favorite quote caught his eye. Success isn't about how far you get away from where you started. It's about how many people you bring with you. It was time to bring success home. The old Zhang family house creaked in the early morning breeze as Alex set up his makeshift office in what used to be their living room. His laptop sat on a card table, surrounded by Kate's proposals and his own hastily scribbled notes. Coffee cups from Rose's Cafe littered the surface, evidence of 3 days of nearly non-stop work. His phone buzzed again. Another message from his company's board members. They weren't happy about his sudden decision to stay in Cedar Grove, and even less happy about his proposal to open a training center here. Market research shows no viable talent pool, one message read. High risk, low reward, said another. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Lisa stood there, holding a paper bag. Brought you breakfast, she said, stepping inside. Rose was worried you weren't eating properly. She paused, taking in the chaos of papers and plans. You're really serious about this, aren't you? Look at this, Alex said, pulling up a spreadsheet on his laptop. Your sister was right. The cost of living here is a fraction of what it is in the city. We spend millions training new employees who leave after 2 years because they can't afford city life. But here, he gestured to the window where kids were walking to school past the empty factory. Those kids already know what hard work means. They understand community. They just need the skills and the opportunity. Lisa picked up one of Kate's proposals, her eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. The board won't like it. It's too risky, too different. Then I'll risk my own money, Alex replied, pulling up his banking app. I've got enough to start something. Maybe not as big as Kate dreamed, but... A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see a group gathering near the factory. Alex and Lisa hurried out to investigate. Mr. Wilson stood at the center of the crowd, waving a piece of paper. They're selling it for storage units, he announced, his voice tight with anger. All that history, all those memories, just boxes gathering dust. Alex pushed through the crowd, his mind racing. How much? He asked. What's the asking price? The crowd went quiet. Mr. Wilson handed him the paper, watching carefully. Alex studied the number, then pulled out his phone. With trembling fingers, he opened his investment portfolio, the one he'd built from his company's early success. What are you doing? Lisa whispered, peering over his shoulder. Making things right, he replied, then addressed the crowd. I need your help. All of you. Not your money, your time, your skills, your knowledge of this town. Kate had a vision for this place, and I think it's time we made it happen. The crowd stirred. Annie from the ice cream shop stepped forward. What kind of help? Alex pulled out Kate's notebook. She wanted to turn the factory into a tech training center. Not just coding, everything from computer repair to digital marketing. Skills that can bring good jobs here. But it won't work if it's just me throwing money around. It needs to come from the community. I can teach basic electronics, Mr. Thompson offered from the back of the crowd. Been doing it at the high school for years. My nephew's a web designer in the city, someone else called out. He'd come back if there was work here. The energy in the crowd shifted. People started talking, sharing ideas, offering skills. Alex watched in amazement as Cedar Grove's spirit, dormant but never dead, began to awaken. We'll need to renovate the whole building, Lisa said, making notes on her phone. That's going to take time, money. I've got the money part covered, Alex replied, showing her his phone screen. He'd just liquidated a significant portion of his personal investment portfolio. But the rest? That has to come from here. From people who understand what this town needs. The crowd had grown larger. Parents with children, teenagers on their way to school, elderly residents who remembered the factory's glory days, all listening, all starting to believe. It won't be easy, Alex continued, raising his voice to reach everyone. We're not just fixing a building, we're building a future. But if we do this right, Cedar Grove won't just be another dying small town. It'll be a model for how communities can adapt and thrive in the digital age. He turned to Lisa, whose eyes were bright with tears. This is what Kate wanted, isn't it? Not just preserving the past, but building something new from its foundation. A young boy pushed through the crowd, the same one Alex had seen working on the taped-up laptop at the community center. Could we really learn to make computers here? He asked, hope clear in his voice. Alex knelt down to the boy's level. Not just make them, create with them. Build things nobody's even thought of yet. This town taught me that anything's possible if you're willing to work for it. Maybe it's time I helped teach that lesson to the next generation. As the morning sun climbed higher, the crowd began to disperse, but something had changed. People walked away in pairs and groups, talking animatedly, making plans. The old factory, which had stood as a symbol of loss for so long, now cast a different kind of shadow, one of possibility. Lisa touched Alex's arm. Kate would have loved this, she said softly. But are you sure? This is a huge risk. Alex looked at his phone, at the confirmation screen for his investment liquidation. Years of careful saving, meant for a future he thought he wanted, now redirected toward a future he needed to help build. The biggest risk, he replied, remembering Kate's words, is forgetting where you came from and who helped you get to where you are. He pocketed his phone and rolled up his sleeves. Now, let's get to work. 3 months had passed since that morning outside the factory. The autumn chill had given way to winter's first snow, which now dusted the scaffolding surrounding the old building. Inside, the hollow shell that had stood empty for a decade hummed with new life. Alex stood in what would soon be the main training floor, surrounded by half-finished walls and the smell of fresh paint. Electricians were installing high-speed internet cables, their voices echoing through the space. Local contractors had been working double shifts to meet the renovation timeline, taking pride in breathing new life into a place that held so many memories. The first batch of computers arrives tomorrow, Lisa announced, walking in with 2 cups of coffee from Rose's. She handed one to Alex, steam rising in the cool air. 25 workstations, just like Kate planned. She paused, looking around. Sometimes I still can't believe this is really happening. The sound of power tools filled the air as workers installed windows in the eastern wall, Kate's specific request in her notes to let the morning sun remind students each day is a fresh start. Her influence was everywhere in the design, from the open floor plan to the community gathering spaces. Mr. Chen's grandson finished the website last night, Lisa continued, pulling up the page on her tablet. Look at the application numbers. Alex leaned in, his eyes widening. Over 300 applications for the first training program, not just from Cedar Grove, but from neighboring towns too. People who couldn't afford traditional college, who couldn't leave their families for big cities, who just needed a chance. "Hey, boss," called out a familiar voice. Amy, the former ice cream shop owner, now the center's operations manager, waved from the mezzanine level. "The local news crew is here for the tour, and you might want to see this." They climbed the stairs to find a small crowd gathered around a computer setup. Tommy, the kid with the taped-up laptop, was showing off the app he built in the pre-launch coding workshop. A simple program to help local farmers track market prices. "My dad used to check prices in the newspaper," he explained proudly. "Now he can just click a button on his phone." The news reporter, a young woman who'd grown up in Cedar Grove herself, was scribbling notes furiously. "So this is just the beginning?" she asked Alex. "What's next for the center?" Before he could answer, the main doors opened, letting in a blast of cold air and a group of his company's senior engineers. They'd volunteered to help design the curriculum, excited by the idea of training new talent in a different way. "The fiber optic installation is done," one of them reported. "Better internet speed than most college campuses, and the virtual reality lab will be ready next week." Alex nodded, but his attention was caught by something else. A group of former factory workers touring the space with Mr. Wilson. Their faces showed a mix of emotions as they saw their old workplace transformed. One man stopped at his former workstation, now converted into a coding desk. "Different kind of production line," the man said as Alex approached. "But still making something valuable, right?" "We're hoping to hire some of the old crew as facility managers," Alex replied. "Nobody knows this building better than you all." The man smiled, running his hand along the desk. "My granddaughter applied for the program. She's 16, smart as a whip. Never thought she'd have a chance like this without leaving town." Outside, the snow was falling harder, but cars kept pulling into the parking lot. Curious locals, reporters from bigger cities, even representatives from other small towns wanting to learn about the project. The story of Cedar Grove's transformation was spreading. Lisa found Alex in Kate's old office, now converted into a student lounge, but still keeping some of her personal touches. The board finally approved the satellite office, she announced. They saw the training center's progress and, well, I guess they couldn't ignore the potential anymore. Alex smiled, remembering the heated video calls and endless presentations it had taken to convince them. But the numbers didn't lie. The cost savings of operating in Cedar Grove, combined with the promise of locally trained talent, had finally won them over. "There's something else," Lisa added, pulling out an envelope. "Remember those grant proposals Kate submitted? One of them just got approved. 5 years late, but," she laughed through sudden tears, "she did it. She's still helping save this town." The sound of voices drew them back to the main floor. The first group of students was getting a tour. Young and old, former factory workers and high school kids, all united by the same hope for a better future. They moved through the space with wonder, touching the new equipment, asking questions, already imagining the possibilities. "When does the first class start?" the news reporter asked, her camera crew capturing the scene. 2 weeks, Alex replied, watching Tommy show his farmer's app to the other students. "But really, this is just the beginning. Technology keeps changing, but the things that matter, community, hard work, looking out for each other, those stay the same. Cedar Grove isn't just getting a tech center. It's building a bridge to the future while keeping its heart intact." As if to emphasize his words, Rose's cafe had set up a temporary coffee stand in the lobby, the familiar smell mixing with fresh paint and new possibilities. The old and the new coming together in ways Kate had dreamed of but never got to see. She would have loved this, Lisa whispered, watching the groups of people mingling, sharing ideas, building connections. Alex nodded, his hand touching the one notebook in his pocket, Kate's plans now becoming reality. She did love it, he corrected gently. She loved it enough to make sure it happened, even if she had to find a roundabout way to get me back here to help. Outside, the snow continued to fall on Cedar Grove, covering the old town in a blanket of white. But inside the old factory, spring was already blooming, in the warmth of community, in the spark of new beginnings, in the promise of tomorrow. 6 months after the tech center's opening, spring had returned to Cedar Grove. The morning sun sparkled off the newly restored factory windows as graduates of the first training program gathered in the main hall, their families filling every available seat. Alex stood at the back, watching as Lisa handed out certificates to each graduate. There was Tommy, no longer using a taped-up laptop, but heading to a paid internship at the company's new local office. Mrs. Baker, a former factory worker who'd learned digital marketing and was already helping local businesses build their online presence. Mr. Wilson's grandson, who'd discovered a talent for data analysis and had 3 job offers waiting. Quite a change from 6 months ago, Rose said softly, appearing beside him with 2 cups of coffee. The cafe owner had opened a permanent location in the tech center's lobby, her familiar treats now fueling the next generation of Cedar Grove's workforce. "Remember what you said when I first came back?" Alex asked, accepting the coffee. "About it not being every day someone like me returns." Rose smiled, watching another graduate cross the stage. "Now we have people coming back every day. The Chen family's reopening the restaurant next week. The Thompsons are talking about starting a new business. Even my daughter's moving back from the city to help run the cafe." The ceremony paused as Lisa called Alex to the stage. The applause that greeted him felt different from any he'd received in corporate boardrooms, warmer, more personal, filled with genuine connection. 6 months ago, he began, looking out at the faces he'd come to know so well. "I thought I was just coming back for a date." Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd. "Instead, I found something I didn't even know I was looking for, a chance to be part of something bigger than success." He gestured to the graduates. "Look around this room. Every person here proves what Kate always believed, that talent and determination can be found anywhere. All they need is a chance to grow." From his pocket, he pulled out an envelope, "Which is why today I'm announcing the creation of the Cedar Grove Foundation. Starting with the old cafe building my parents once owned, we're going to create a chain of small business incubators across town. Every empty storefront will become an opportunity for someone's dream to take root." The announcement sent a buzz through the crowd. Alex continued, his voice steady. "But that's not all. The foundation will also provide scholarships for students who want to study technology, named in honor of the person who never stopped believing in this town's potential, Kate Mitchell." Lisa wiped tears from her eyes as she joined him at the podium. "My sister used to say that success isn't measured by how far you get from home, but by how many people you bring with you on the journey. Today, we're not just celebrating new careers. We're celebrating a community that refused to be left behind." After the ceremony, Alex walked down Main Street, now showing signs of revival. The hardware store was open again, offering tech support alongside tools. The old bookstore had become a co-working space. Even the ice cream shop was coming back, with Amy planning to add a digital ordering system designed by one of the tech center's graduates. He stopped at the town square, where workers were installing a new digital community board, another project from the training program. The screen displayed local news, job listings, and upcoming events. But in the corner, there was always a small photo of Kate, smiling that determined smile that had somehow reached across time to bring him home. "Planning to stick around?" Lisa asked, catching up to him. She'd grown from being just Kate's sister into a true partner in Cedar Grove's transformation, now running the foundation's daily operations. "Actually," Alex replied, "I just bought my old house. The commute to the city office isn't bad, but," he shrugged, "something about watching the sun rise over those mountains every morning feels right." They walked to Rose's original cafe, where the graduation celebration was in full swing. Inside, past and future mingled seamlessly. Former factory workers chatted with young coders, while small business owners discussed digital strategies with new graduates. Tommy rushed up, excited to share news about his app's latest update. "We've got farmers from 3 counties using it now. And guess what? My little sister wants to learn coding too." Alex watched the boy dash off to demonstrate his project to others. 6 months ago, he'd thought his success story was complete. Now he understood that real success was about writing new chapters together, about turning me into we. "You know what Kate would say about all this?" Lisa asked as they watched the celebration. Alex smiled, remembering the words from her notebook that had started it all. That it's not about saving the past or chasing the future. It's about building bridges between them. Outside, the spring breeze carried the scent of new beginnings through Cedar Grove's streets. The old factory's windows gleamed with promise, while downtown storefronts filled with fresh possibilities. In the distance, the mountains stood unchanged, reminding everyone that some foundations never shake. The billionaire who'd returned for a date had found something far more valuable, not just a way to give back, but a way to move forward. And in doing so, he'd helped prove what Kate had known all along, that sometimes the best way to find yourself is to help others find their way too. As the sun set on another day in Cedar Grove, the tech center's lights glowed warmly, a beacon of hope for other small towns facing similar challenges. The story of this place would continue to unfold, not as a tale of loss and return, but as proof that with vision, commitment, and community, any ending could become a new beginning.